Do you want to break into the comic book industry as a writer? In this video, I interview a successful, self-published comic book writer named Russell Nohelty, who is not only a USA Today best-selling writer, but has also raised over $200,000 on Kickstarter thus far. In fact, at this very moment, he has a new comic book coming out called Ichabod Jones Monster Hunter Volume 3. It's currently funding on Kickstarter and there's only a few days left. So I encourage you to click the link in the description below and join me in backing Russell's campaign. Without further ado, here is my interview with Russell Nohelty. And so I'm betting there's people out there who, you're so successful, you've achieved so much, you're obviously a phenomenal writer. You're an incredible writer, I think. How did you get your start? Like, what is your story of how you learned how to write, how you produced your first book, all that? I'm curious about your story.
Sure. So I started in movies and TV. I wanted to be an actor and then a director and then a camera operator. And soon I learned that the only person who has true freedom in movies and TV is the writer. Like, they're the only person that can work without anybody else except staring at a blank page. And all you need is a computer and Word, really. Now that means there's a glut of stuff out there, but like, you can do it with just a computer and Word, and you can handwrite it. Like, you don't even need that. I had heard I get in a bad car accident after I produced my first movie, and all I could do was write. And I had heard that, like, your first 10 scripts are going to suck. So I just decided to write 10 scripts as fast as I possibly can in every genre and see what I liked, which is why I give that advice. Like, there are things from romantic comedies that I liked when I wrote that, and thriller that I liked, and comedy and drama. And there's things of all of these stuff that built my sort of war chest of what I do now. But I allowed myself to play. And the wonderful thing about movies and TV is they never get made. So all of that terrible writing is in a vault somewhere that no one will ever see except my manager. And only because he asked for it. Every time I tell him, don't read more of my old work, and he still does it anyway. So 2008, I moved to LA to try and make a living as a writer. 2010, I was introduced to comics by my then manager, and I immediately fell in love with it. And I started to write comics. My first comic was called Wannabes. It was an 8-page ashcan about fake superheroes that get real superpowers. It's adorable. And then from that, I started working on, I learned how to sort of write comics, but I'd already known how to sort of write visually because I'd worked in movies and TV for so long. And that is when I made Ichabod. And I made Ichabod expressly because I didn't know how to make comics. So I don't want to call it a crutch, but it was a crutch. The crutch that I built in a crutch to the universe, which was, you don't know if he's killing monstrous humans or it's all in his head the whole time. So if nothing makes sense, or if I switch back between perspectives, it doesn't matter because he doesn't know what he's doing. So if the book doesn't make sense and it's terrible, that is what I would just tell people. And people fell in love with it. And from that, I learned how to make like a story that works as like one narrative, which is where Katrina came from, which is where Pixie Dust came from, and where my anthology work came from. And it's the same process I used for writing novels. My first novel was a very simple story. My second novel was told all in blog posts. My third novel was the first narrative. And then I started writing more and more complex stories. But it all goes back to writing all of those movies and TV, and just writing a lot of stuff, and writing in every genre that I could think of, writing everything that I thought I liked, and learning that I really don't like that, or I'm really good at writing dialogue or structure, or structuring this kind of story, or, innately understanding characters in this way. And these are the characters I like writing. And, my manager, when I first got him, said, what do you write? And I told him, I said, I don't know, like, it's the thing I write. Like if you like the thing I write, you'll like this. He's like, that's not good enough. Like, you have to know what like your story is, because that's what will resonate with the audience. That's what will resonate. Like, I'm not saying you always have to tell that same story, but there are core tenets of the things that we like, themes that we come back to again and again and again and again. And that is what you learn by doing so much work before you actually get to the work of being a professional. So I started in 2004 trying to be a professional creator. I got my first manager in 2008. I got my first comic book contract in 2011. My first comic manager in 2012. My first contract was reverted to me in 2013. And I started and I launched my first book, self-published, in 2014, and I didn't go out on my own in 2015. I didn't start making a good living doing it in 2017. So it's like there are all these steps on the journey that like that you can point to and say, well, this is when you were a professional, or that was when you were professional, and this is when we were professional. But the truth is that no matter what point, whether you pick 2017 or 15 or 11, there was still eons in a creative world that like no one will ever see.
But so I read, Katrina Hates the Dead, your graphic novel, yesterday or the day before, and I just loved it. And frankly, there have been comics by top publishers that I have frankly been highly disappointed with. And here from a self-publisher, I've read one of the best things I've read probably all year, right?
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And I'm not saying you need that validation to have like a big name on you, but why do you choose? I'm curious why you choose to continue self-publishing instead of trying to do what other people do and try to submit a pitch to a publisher and going that route.
Oh God, I'm gonna get in so much trouble. I'm gonna say it anyway. Every publishing contract I've ever gotten has sucked. They are terrible. They expect, and it takes forever for them to publish the book once you've produced it. So, especially once you have a product that has some cachet, they still want a piece of your IP, and I am not willing to give a piece of my IP to new products. Now, I have not seen every company's contracts. I've seen many of them. I won't say which ones I have and haven't seen, where I've been offered deals and where I haven't. But I don't like to wait. And I want my books to come out the way I want my books to come out. And I've been very blessed that my work has got made enough for me to self-fund. So I fund the books, like the Kickstarters fund the books. And I break even on those costs. And I would love to find a publisher who will accept that I have done the hard work of building a brand that is respected, and I don't want to give a piece of the IP of my work away, which is the biggest part of this. Like, the biggest part is that they want to keep the IP. They want a piece of the IP, and I'm unwilling to give a piece of the IP up. That is most of the other points I can live with. But the ownership of the IP, especially because I live in Los Angeles and I have a management team already, I'm not willing to give that away. So and also I burned a lot of publishing bridges by talking about how bad people's contracts are. So most people don't want to have a contract with me because I've already pissed them off something fierce. But yeah, I mean, I didn't like. Publishing a book for the mass market is different than publishing a book for independently. And my brain has not until recently been able to work in the way that I can see how to bring my work into a bookstore or a library, because Katrina, as much as I love it, is not the kind of book that will sell well at a bookstore or library. It's violent. It's and it pains me to say it, but I understand why a publisher would not take a chance on it when it was first made. Now I cannot give the rights up, because I will not give up the IP of the entire universe that I have created. But there are plenty of publishers that I am speaking to now about new projects that may or may not be on the table in the future. And with new IP, which I have not created very often outside of Ichabod and Katrina, with new IP, I'm much more willing to give up a piece of the IP because I haven't done the work to build it out yet.
That makes sense, but I'm sure there's people thinking, well, what about Image Comics? Image Comics, they don't own the IP. They correct me if I'm wrong. It's called creator-owned comics for a reason. So, am I missing something?
I mean, if you can get into Image, I mean, Image is one company out of hundreds of publishers that that can publish your independent comic. And like, you're probably not going to get an Image. Like, sorry, Angelo, like, you're probably not going to get your book in Image, because Image traditionally now at least works with big names, and almost exclusively big names, that to bring their books from Marvel and DC and other companies to them. That's not 100% true, but if you just are an independent creator, your odds of getting into Image are almost as bad as getting into any other publishing company. No, they're as bad as getting into any other publishing company.
But I mean, it's sold extremely well. Katrina has sold extremely well. It's extremely well written, and on top of that, I believe your artist has worked for the top 2 publishers.
Yeah, he works for Marvel right now. I think he's on a book. He was on Hulk last time I saw.
All right, so doesn't that fulfill your criteria or their criteria?
I don't know. I mean, it still doesn't. Comic book publishing is very expensive, and most publishers can't break even without a piece of the IP rights. Okay, and they don't want to. And I've talked to many publishers who said, I am only in this for the IP rights. And I'm not saying that's, I mean, I don't like that. But, there are plenty of, and thing is, most publishers and most books will not break out. We have survivorship bias, where we see the ones that hit. Like, we see Dave Pepose like doing the OZ and doing Spencer and Locke and like breaking out. Like, we see the ones that we see the ones that succeed. But for every David Pepose and Spencer and Locke, there's a dozen ones that didn't even that like barely made a dent or sold very, very poorly on their first runs, and like they could have done it better on their own. So it is amazing to be at one of these companies if you are a breakout star. Like, if you are Melissa Albert, if you are David Pepose, like, these companies can be freaking phenomenal, because like they're like they can take your book to places that you could never even imagine. But for the general creator who's making a mid-list or maybe not even mid-list book, it doesn't do much better than to be just do it on your own. Like, usually it will be better at the end, and you will make more money doing it on your own. Maybe not with conventions right now as they are, but like if you can run the convention circuit, you can make better money than you can at 99% of publishers with 99% of books.
Well, speaking of doing it yourself, I was intrigued by your story of how you had launched Katrina on Indiegogo twice, failed, and then you tried another crowdfunding campaign. How did you go from failure to tremendous success? That is a story that I have got to hear.
I learned marketing and sales. It's not a tricky story. Like I learned I actually took multiple jobs in marketing and sales. I took jobs marketing for companies. I became a sales associate. I worked my way up to sales manager. Like I learned how to sell. Like I learned how to take the thing that I had and put the sizzle on it to back it up. And that is the thing that changed. Plain and simple. Like it's not fun. It's not a fun story. It's not like a sexy story. It's not like the Cyanide Happiness story where like they hit like and they put their thing up and suddenly like they're huge like their first year right out of the gate. Like it was a process of failing and one day I said I was done. I said I can't do this again. Like I can't fail again. How do I succeed? And I learned that the one thing that was consistent in all of the failures that I had is I had no idea how to sell a book. And instead of saying those words, instead of saying that and then being like, woe is me, like I don't know how to sell a book like most creators do. I'm sorry if I'm not meaning to call anyone out, but like most creators will like not, well, we'll say they don't know how to sell and that will be the end of it, as if like the magic fairy will come down and like bless them with like sales, even though they freely admit that they don't know how to sell and market. I don't like sales and marketing either, but like I know that the sales and marketing part is what sells the book at the end of the day. So I live by that sales, by the sales and marketing. And it is because I can write a great book and then sell and market that great book. That is why I've had the modicum of success that I've had, because those first two times I launched on Indiegogo, I had no idea what I was doing. By the time I finally launched Ichabod, I was working in sales. By the next year, I was the sales manager of. By the time we made Katrina, I had been promoted to sales manager, left that job, started my own company, and like was then selling stuff by myself. So yeah, that's the difference. Is I learned how to sell things.
But Katrina had, correct me if I'm wrong, was Katrina already done by the time your first Indiegogo hit?
I don't remember. Yes, it was.
Okay,
yes, it was.
So that, correct me if I'm wrong, was, that 100+ page, graphic novel, beautiful artwork by now Marvel artist. I'm assuming that was a tremendous investment, especially for a writer just starting out. Am I wrong?
Yeah, it was like 15 grand, I think I put into that book.
1.5
before I started making. Yeah,
that seems like a deal.
That's well, this was an artist at the very beginning of his career. Like you couldn't get him for that now. But like, I invested a lot of money up front. I was used to investing a lot of money. Like I invested $30,000 in my first movie. Like to me, wow. $30,000, $15,000 to get back what I got back from Katrina was nothing compared to what I did for my movie. I think I put in the course that I spent $100,000 before I started making any money. And I think that's, I mean, I did those numbers pretty, it's probably more than that, but it was roughly about $100,000 that I put in between the books and the comics and the movies and the gear that I had. It's like $100,000 of stuff that I put in before I started seeing any real profit from it, which is why I'm so adamant about showing other people how to not waste that $100,000 that I did.
Well, I mean, sir, I've started some businesses myself. I've wasted several thousand. Can't say I've gotten my hands on 100,000, but I think you and I have something in common in that regard. So I'm sorry. So your first Kickstarter campaign was not Katrina?
No, first Kickstarter was Ichabod.
So why did you switch back to Ichabod instead of launching Katrina again?
Because Ichabod was supposed to be published in trade by a company. I won't say who. And they decided not to publish it in trade, and I got the rights back and I had it available. And so I chose to fail with Ichabod. Ichabod is a wonderful book because it's always been the book that I was willing to fail on. It's the book that I was willing to waste every dollar that I spent on production with it just to like learn how to make comics. It was just to break into comics. It was the book I was willing to try on Kickstarter with after 2 failed Indiegogos with Katrina. And so I figured that I would see how, because Ichabod had some name recognition, that I would try with Ichabod and then I would move to Katrina, depending on how that went, instead of just literally trying 3 failed Indiegogo campaigns with 3 failed campaigns with the same book over and over again. I think at the time, Ichabod was still under consideration with Katrina was still under consideration with a publisher, and it wasn't until I started the campaign that like we pulled that book. So
what did you do different with Ichabod on that Kickstarter that you had never done before?
I spent years showing people the work, showing people the artwork. I brought it to conventions. I brought it to like Comic Book Sunday and other places that I went. I showed it to everyone that I could think of. And I learned how to sell the book. Like I learned how to sell both with my sales training and then with Ichabod.
So you're telling me that Ichabod was already done. It had been bought and paid for, already printed, and you were going from comic book convention to convention, selling it already printed. Is that correct?
No. I did print a small run for a show before the campaign, but I learned I was bringing like my tablet to show people to shows, to places. So it was on my tablet, whatever tablet. I had like an iPad a long time ago that I would bring to like places to show people. But I showed just as many people as I could. I made as many friends in comics that I could. I made as many comic book creator fans that comic book just fans that I could, and then we launched.
Okay, that's great. And how long was that book, page wise?
9 with everything all in, it was 112 pages. I believe it was like 90 pages of art.
And that was already done, or already done before the Kickstarter?
It was done. I've never done a campaign that the book was not done first.
Well, you do tend to see that on Kickstarters and Indiegogos. The book is not done, and then you're hoping that artist or writer or whoever is working on it. But you chose to go. It's already done, and then launch it.
Yeah, because then I can turn it around much quicker.
And
then I can beat you at your own game. Like I can beat you because I can, if it's going to take you 6 months to make the book, like I can do 3 books in that time.
What do you mean?
I can, like if I have the book done, and then I bring it to Kickstarter, it'll take me 4 months to get that book 3 months to get that book into your hands. If you don't have the book done and you have to make the book, it's going to take you several months to make the book and then more months to print it and distribute it. So by having the book done, I can produce more things. I can do more Kickstarters. I can get books in people's hands faster. And that's the name of the game, is in building loyalty, is how fast can you get your books into people's hands after the Kickstarter is done.
So you're saying getting books to fulfilling your campaign as quickly as possible after the Kickstarter ends is going to make people happy instead of, upsetting them because they still haven't gotten their book and it's been a year.
Yes, exactly.
That makes sense. Now, so you did Ichabod, you did Katrina, and then at some point you got and became a USA Today award-winning writer. Was that with one of your comic books?
No, it was with a novel.
Which novel was it?
It was a book called Mystery Spot in the Godsverse Chronicles.
That's cool. So I talked about this with somebody earlier, and it's just the idea of there are some comics writers who say all I want to do is comics, and there are others who say no, I'm a writer who writes a constellation of products. I write movies, I write novels, I write comic books. Now you seem to be one of the latter. Tell me, how did you get into novel writing? And I don't know, which do you prefer? Why do you like doing novels? Why do you like doing comic books? When do you switch? What makes you switch from one to the other?
I think you should write everything if you're a writer. It's not enough of a living in comics to make a living in comics for most people as a writer. You know, I'm in a writers group with some pretty successful writers, and you know, for the most part, they write everything. They write comics. They've written comics that you know and then they write and then they write TV show adaptations. They write animated stuff. Like they write everything because like work will dry up in the industry, and like you want to be able to have enough arrows in your quiver. I mean, that's what building a creative career is all about, having enough arrows in your quiver that you can survive, because sometimes there will be a glut in comics and no one will be buying novels, and sometimes there'll be no money in comics and there'll be money in novels, or there won't be money in either and you'll make money because you've written a movie, or like all of those things are part of your life as a writer. As an artist, you make more money on a per page basis than a writer does. So as an artist can make a living in comics or doing graphic design or something because they just make more money. They just make more money doing like creative work than a writer does. A writer makes their living off volume and being able to say, oh, you're working on one book for the next year. Cool. I can write 10 books in the next year. And that is the unfair advantage that writers have over artists. Artists have the unfair advantage of being able to like charge a lot of money per page. Writers have the unfair advantage of being able to do way more projects at one time than an artist does. And we should be turning into the skid of our unfair advantage instead of trying to emulate what is successful about a writer or an artist, depending on which one you are.
Yes, I heard that on one of your podcasts. How you were saying you were comparing an artist and their advantages, disadvantages to a writer, and their advantages, disadvantages to a publisher. But I wasn't sure if they're where you were trying to say which was better than the other. Were you trying to say that
none of them are better?
None of them
are better. They're not better. They're just different. If you are trying to emulate the unfair advantage of somebody else in their industry, then you are going to fail. Like if you have to understand that the unfair advantage that you have as a publisher, it is unfair that you can publish 40 books a year, but you have no one like is personally invested usually in a publisher. They just don't care about the publisher. They care about the creator. So like that is the knock against the publisher part of it, but they make up for it by just the sheer volume. A writer can put out more projects at more different mediums than an artist can, and an artist can charge more money for originals and commissions and all the other stuff that a writer can't. But you can't spend your life trying to figure out like how to, like, you can't make a career as a writer trying to do the same thing as an artist does. That just is not going to work, because you will never make the page rate that an artist does. Ever. You never will do it. Even if you're the top writer in your field, you will, in comics, you will not make the same as an artist will for that same page. It will not happen. The difference is you can write 5 comics that month or 10 comics that month, where an artist will be writing 1 book. So if you are focused on being on doing the things that artists do, but you're a writer, you are going to fail, because you physically cannot do the thing that an artist does.
I can appreciate that. I mean, and that makes complete sense. I'm curious. So you did your Ichabod book, you did your Katrina book, and then at some point you said, I want to do an anthology. Why did you want to do that? What was the trigger for that?
I had nothing else in my slate, and I needed something else in my slate, and I was not growing as fast as I wanted to. And I thought that doing an anthology, if I picked the right creators, I could bring a whole bunch of new fans to Wannabe Press. And also I wanted to work with a lot of creators that I never would. Like, I'm never going to work with another writer. Like, I'm a writer. Like, I don't need another writer. There was a whole slew of writers I wanted to work with, a whole slew of artists I wanted to work with that wrote in styles that I didn't quite, that I probably would never work in. And so I figured that, like, I could make a big team up book with a bunch of other fans of monsters who had little audiences of monsters, and we did we had a lot of fun doing it. Then we would be able to be able to grow as a writer, grow as an editor, grow as a publisher. I'd be able to bring a bunch of new fans into the comics, and that is exactly what happened.
Okay, so when you do your next anthology, are you looking for just, for example, you're saying, hey, I have a spot for, a 4-page story. Are you expecting a writer to pitch you a 4-page story, or are you expecting a writer to come with an artist already paired?
All books that I do you have to have the artist in place. In fact, I'm going to be frank, like I hire the artist. Like I hire the artist in the pitch. Like I have no idea if like for the most part, the writing is going to be good. Like I want a good writer, but I need a good artist, because the artist is what's going to sell the book, the anthology. And so if you are a writer, it behooves you. And I cannot tell you how many amazing writers that I cut out of my anthologies because the art is not good enough.
Wow.
That is the number one thing that I cut for. I cut for length, and I cut for the fact that the anthology, like the art's not good enough. I do cut art as well, obviously, because like that doesn't bring you all the way down to your page count. But the very first thing that I cut is this art up to par? And is this story within the length that I need it to be? Just cutting those two things out will bring me about 80% to page count.
Wow. So, but I mean, that's just the person that's just the penciler. There's also, the inker and the colorist and the letterer.
I mean, they need the whole team in place. They need the whole team in place. They have to have the whole team in place and have to look at the whole team from beginning to end.
Okay.
So it's not just penciler. If they have a different team. Most people have like one person that does everything. But if they don't, I have a slot that says penciler, inker, colorist, letterer.
So somebody who could do the whole shebang is going to be more desirable.
No, it's just it's just like I have to approve each step. I have to approve, if like you have a different letterer, I have to approve that letterer. I have to approve that colorist. I have to approve that inker. I have to approve that penciler. If you do the whole thing, then I have to approve you once, but you have to be able to do every single one of those steps.
That makes sense. And so when you say you pay, do you mean you pay up front, or people get paid on the back end after the Kickstarter comes through?
That depends on the project. But generally they get paid. It depends on the project. On an anthology, I pay once the Kickstarter's over. On a personal project, I pay as the project's going on, because it's a much bigger investment of time.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, that makes sense. I'm curious that's got to be complicated if you do an anthology. You have a bunch of different artists who did each slice differently. How do you divvy that all up? I'm sure that's
I pay out to one artist, and they have to do it themselves. They have to figure it out.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. So real quick before we go, can you just tell us a little bit about your current Kickstarter and where people can find it?
Sure. So it's the 3rd volume of Ichabod Jones Monster Hunter. I usually have it behind me, but I'm getting my floors redone, and so I can't, I had to put everything in storage. So it's about a psychopath that escapes a mental asylum and becomes a monster hunter, but doesn't know if he's killing monsters, humans, or it's all in his head the whole time. This is the 3rd volume. The Kickstarter is for issues 9, 10, 11, and 12, all in hardcover. You can find it on Kickstarter. You can get the first issue on the Kickstarter for free, and then it's a really fun book. It's like high energy. It's really weird. It's very funny. It's the book that I never thought would be associated with me for my whole career, that I'm very proud that has lived on way longer than I ever thought possible. And I love that about Ichabod. I love that about Katrina too, and the fact that we've got so many novels now, and we've got a whole universe being built out, and a 3rd graphic novel in production. But Ichabod was rejected by so many publishers that to watch him be so successful with so many people is one of the most gratifying parts of my entire career.
That is awesome. Russell, I wish you very much luck with your campaign. I know it'll be a smash. And I just want to thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing all your knowledge with us, and me, and the viewers. And I just want to, have a great night. And again, thank you. You've been a joy to have. So have a great time, and thank you.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. I hope to talk to you soon. Bye-bye, Russell. And there you have it. I hope you learned a lot about self-publishing and how to break into the comic book industry as a writer. Thank you again to Russell Nohelty for taking the time to do this interview. If you viewers would like to learn more about Russell and back his campaign, then the link to his Kickstarter is in the description below. If you found this video helpful and you'd like me to keep making more, then please convey that to both me and the YouTube algorithm by hitting like, subscribe, and the bell icon for notifications. If you have any questions, feedback, or suggestions for future videos, then please let me know in the comments section down below. I hope you found this video helpful. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.